Number 10. Kills. One of the worst things about Wolverine in general, but also maybe one of the best things, is that he kills. Or more now that he's willing to kill, I guess. Although back in the day, he really did kill pretty indiscriminately. And like I said, it was basically what made him one of the worst, while also being the best at what he does. Although, as Wolverine has even said himself, what he does isn't usually very nice. Now Wolverine is more reserved to maiming those he comes up against, only really killing those who he feels really deserve it, who are beyond redemption. But even then, the fact that Wolverine thinks he gets to decide those folks' fate could be seen as, well, pretty problematic. I mean, Wolverine's a pretty good dude all around, but I still don't think, even as a hero, that he should get the judgment call on who lives and who dies. You know what I mean? It definitely makes him a way more complex and interesting character. I will say that, so it is good in that way. Number 9. Almost killed an innocent. During his first long-running Wolverine series, Wolverine at one point must face off against Lady Deathstrike. The first time around that this happens in the series is back in the past, after Wolverine has seemingly traveled back in time via a picture. It makes a lot more sense if you read the story, but it's basically what happens. While attempting to escape Lady Deathstrike and defeat the German World War II soldiers who have infiltrated the part of Spain Wolverine is in, he and the rebels are faced with the decision of what to do with a young prisoner who has seen too much and could cause them to be captured if he's forced to talk. Prisoner's name is Jamie, by the way. I didn't write that down, but I know that, just in case you're wondering. One of the options on the table is to simply take out the prisoner Jamie, but because of his age, Wolverine ultimately helps to let the boy go and set him free. However, for a small moment there, it is implied that Wolverine has basically made the other choice and decided to kill the prisoner rather than let him walk free, with a promise that he won't tell anyone what he has seen or heard about where the rebels are headed. It's a very shocking moment where you're like, wait, did that just happen? Don't worry, it didn't happen. Oh, it only almost happened. The notion was entertained, and that I think is still pretty bad. Number 8. Relationship with Squirrel Girl. Wolverine's relationship with Squirrel Girl, as was established in New Avengers, might be considered by some to be one of the worst things he's ever done, or that was ever done to him as a character, I guess. This is likely because Squirrel Girl, aka Doreen Green, is often depicted as being from a different generation entirely than Wolverine, and that's not even considering that he's actually even older than he appears and than the generation that he first appeared in. Squirrel Girl and Wolverine were implied to have had a romantic relationship in the 2010 New Avengers series in issue number 7, and many consider it to be pretty odd. And I gotta say, the way it's also kind of weirdly like shoehorned in there, you're like, what? Why is this in here? What purpose narratively does this really give us? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Wolverine, then be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Goodness knows he's done a lot of bad things. Even Wolverine would say that though. He'd be like, I got a lot of things in my closet. I got a lot of skeletons in my closet, bub.
Coming in at number 7, we have the vicious Vampire Lord Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bitten and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become their leader. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty terrifying rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting duo.
Number 6. Got even with the Punisher. So the Punisher has done some pretty heinous things to Wolverine over the years in their ongoing fight for who can be the most edgy. This has less to do with Wolverine and Punisher feuding within the comics, and more to do with shots being fired between a few of their passionate writers, Wolverine's Frank Thierry and Punisher's Garth Ennis. Now granted, Thierry has also written a few Punisher titles in his time, although I don't think Ennis has ever written a Wolverine titled book, at least not as far as I know, which is surprising to me. But anyways, I digress. In Thierry's 2003 issue of Wolverine, issue 186, Thierry ended up aiming to get revenge on the Punisher for what Garth Ennis had him do in 2002 during his Marvel Knights run on Punisher in issue number 17. Ennis had Punisher brutally attack and maim Wolverine, basically, even going so far as to steamroll him, and some other things, which I don't know if I can even say on YouTube, but they were bad. To get revenge, Thierry had Wolverine imply the Punisher was gay. Doesn't sound so bad until you read it and you see how it's presented, with Logan implying the Punisher is basically lesser or less of a man or a hero because of his possible sexual orientation. Yikes. Maybe don't do that. Maybe don't write that. It's unfortunate because now that's also on Wolverine as a character. Eek. Number 5. Jean Grey gets more help than she bargained for. Jean gets more help than she asked for from Wolverine in this issue of X-Men. In fact, she didn't even really ask for his help to begin with, but she did complain about her ability to move freely in her outfit and her struggle to kind of like tear it so that she could move a little bit more freely. Which obviously was a classic mistake because you know Logan is always more than happy to help Jeannie gain more mobility by maybe, you know, parting with pieces of her garment. Hey, he's just trying to help her out. This all goes down in the very first X-Men Christmas special that we ever got. In this story, the X-Men are kidnapped, and it's during their daring escape that Jean complains of her inability to move freely. She's trying to like tear her dress. So Wolverine, being the gentleman he is, sees her struggling and decides to help her tear away the bottom half of her gown, freeing up her movement, but at the expense of both irritating and seemingly confusing Jean, who actually responds with, "Hey, not so blasted short. Thank you very much. I think." I just love that whole response. She's like, "I'm mad, but like what even happened?" Number 4 became Apocalypse. Of course, this one also did not happen in the main continuity, but hey, it still happened, so it still counts. This all went down in Age of Apocalypse, where Wolverine, here known as Weapon X, would fight against Apocalypse for most of his life. At one point, he was part of Magneto's X-Men, but would leave them to rescue Jean Grey, his love, and later his wife, and fight alongside her against Apocalypse in their own way. Eventually, however, Jean was believed to have been killed and Weapon X would become a recluse, only to find out years later that she was actually alive. Dun dun dun. When the Celestials returned to Earth following the death of Apocalypse, James Howlett offered himself to the Celestials in order to prevent the destruction of Earth. However, this caused him to become the very villain he had hated the most, as the Celestials used tech to modify him, giving him great power but basically warping his mind, and causing him to become Apocalypse's heir, known as Weapon Omega. He was basically just like, evolution is what it's all about, baby. People were like, but don't you see? You're Apocalypse now. And he's like, but it's different. I'm trying to save people by killing people. Wait a minute, maybe you're right.
Coming in at number 3, we have HYDRA Wolverine. Hailing from the reality known as Earth 1720, this version of Wolverine is fully committed to the evil ideology of the organization HYDRA, complete with a new green and yellow color scheme to his costume. Married to this universe's version of the Invisible Woman, who also happens to be this universe's version of Madam Hydra, this Wolverine was apparently successful in conquering his home reality along with his lover, and has since begun to travel the multiverse searching for more worlds to destroy in the universe's most twisted romantic honeymoon. Luckily for the Marvel multiverse, this Wolverine would be defeated by a variant of Kitty Pryde and the rest of the Exiles, who wound up tricking him into stabbing himself with his own adamantium claws. Better luck next time, Hydra.
Number 2 made moves on MJ. So this one is so awful, it of course cannot come from the main canon of Earth 616. Instead, this point comes to us from the alternate reality of Earth 1610, also known as the Ultimate Universe. After Wolverine had she attempted to get back at him by making him telepathically swap bodies with the person he hated the most, which ended up being Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Although Jean later says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know this would happen to you, Peter. Oops." But anyways, while swapped, both heroes struggle to deal with the everyday while occupying each other's bodies. However, Wolverine still manages to find some time to put some moves on MJ. Well, they don't seal the deal. This is really messed up because Mary Jane at this point in time is a teenager, and she didn't even know that Peter and Logan had swapped bodies, so she thought that it was just Peter looking for some action instead of the super old at this point thanks to his healing factor X-Men hero Wolverine. Although not a very heroic moment here, Wolverine. What you doing? Don't do that. Number 1, kill Daken. I think one of the worst things you can do as a parent is to kill those you're supposed to be looking out for and taking care of and protecting, even if your son happens to be the often villainous Daken, now commonly referred to by his actual birth/human name, Akihiro. At one point, Wolverine was forced to put down Akihiro during a fight. Akihiro had held a grudge against his old man for years, having been trained by Romulus to hate Logan after being being stolen from his mother's womb and raised by Romulus. For years, Wolverine thought his son was dead, not knowing to come searching for Akihiro. But Akihiro was raised to believe he was basically abandoned, and he also grew up in a household where people didn't like him because he was half Japanese and half Canadian, so that was another issue. Thanks to some plotting from the devious and diabolical mind of Victor Creed, aka Wolverine's nemesis Sabretooth, Wolverine was forced into a death match with Daken, a match that ended with Wolverine killing Akihiro, drowning him in a puddle, while sadly thinking of what could have been had Akihiro been given a chance at a semi-normal life, being raised by Wolverine and of course his now deceased mother Itsu. What would it have been like if their life had been happy? We'll never know because he gets drowned in a puddle. But don't worry, Akihiro's alive and well now, so it all fixed itself. And now he and Wolverine are on great terms, so never mind, I guess. Number 10. Deadpool has a breakthrough. A breakthrough. Get it? You will. There have been a few times that Wolverine has shamed and embarrassed Deadpool, especially in combat. One such time, Deadpool was actually the one looking for a fight, and so Wolverine decided to oblige him. But he didn't just do that, he also gave him some pretty witty retorts as well. You see, Deadpool was made to believe that fighting Wolverine would help resolve some issues he has with his own past. And while Wolverine not only schooled him in combat, but also wisdom, at one point Deadpool asks Logan to dig deeper. Not knowing at the time what Wade is talking about at all, Wolverine responds with that deep enough murk as he stabs him through with his claws. Wolverine has always had some of the best mid-combat speeches and retorts. He also might have the mutant power of being able to leap and give you a whole speech during that one leap. Number 9. Namor gets beat in his own domain. Surprisingly, Wolverine has seemingly held his own against Namor more than once in the comics. One such time was when the two duked it out in Civil War. Their fight goes down in Wolverine's tie-in issues, mainly being featured in issue 45. Here, not only does Wolverine prove himself on land, but also in the sea, breaking into Atlantis and Namor's palace, and even managing to hold his own in combat against Namor's guards, fighting underwater. And Wolverine isn't usually the best at fighting underwater. He has an underwater suit of Iron Man's to aid him, but it doesn't seem to operate very smoothly for him. Despite this, he gets a few good hits in at Namor, punching him back for a joke that he made when he thought Wolverine was Iron Man about keeping Wolverine on a tighter leash. Yikes. In the end, Wolverine also proves himself to Namor, and despite their disagreement over who should get custody of the criminal Nitro, Namor meets him later at a bar to give Wolverine the information that he was looking for, which I think is pretty nice. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more embarrassing moments that Wolverine has doled out, be sure to head on over to Facebook and click that like, because we are going to be putting up more content over there, and there'll be lots of good stuff for you in regards to Wolverine and other heroes. Number 8. Emma Frost's dirty secrets revealed. Dirty, dirty secrets. Actually, it's not that dirty. It's not that dirty of a secret in my mind, but you know. In this moment, it appeared to be, I guess, kind of dirty. During the first Civil War, Wolverine sets out on his own mission to capture Nitro, the one behind the start of the Civil War. Basically, the catalyst, if you will. He does this against the wishes of Cyclops and Emma Frost. When Emma and Cyke confront him about it in the 2003 Wolverine series in issue 46, the issue following the one with Namor, Emma threatens to basically mind wipe him back to a 3-year-old mental capacity. Wolverine responds by putting Emma in her place by 1, reminding her that the psi shields Professor X gave him protects him against her powers, and 2, by revealing that he knows she and Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, used to, team up. Well, Emma seems pretty shocked that Wolverine knows about this and is pretty embarrassed that he outed this previous relationship of hers to Scott. Her reaction is also interesting, as it's also during Civil War I, I believe, that she discloses that Scott does know of their relationship, of her relationship with Tony in the past, in a different comic. Although, you know, maybe this happened after that, but I do believe the issue where Emma brings it up is Civil War issue number 3, and I think that was released before this issue. But maybe the continuity in canon is different than the release order, or I just found a continuity error, and that's what that is. Number 7. Killed Jean Grey. Wolverine has done this on multiple occasions, and in one instance, kinda killed Jean on repeat, stuck on a loop of death after she refused to stay dead thanks to the resurrection powers of the Phoenix Force. Initially, Wolverine killed Jean out of mercy to save her from a gruesome death, burning up as they were in a space shuttle that was rapidly getting closer and closer to the sun. However, this death was actually quite helpful, as it allowed Jean to at least regenerate, unlocking her full potential as the Phoenix, which meant that she could actually then save them, so yay! And surprisingly, she also wasn't even mad about Wolverine killing her. Bonus! I'd be pretty mad, to be honest. I'd be like, wow, you just killed me. That's pretty shady, man. But I guess when you're like, but you unlocked my full potential, it's like, well, alright. Shortly thereafter, Jean would be killed permanently by Magneto, but years later would return again, only to have Wolverine, afraid of the potential of Dark Phoenix, along with the rest of the X-Men, kill her on repeat for a while by stabbing her through with his claws until he realized this wasn't exactly having the same effect that he'd hoped, as the Phoenix Force basically just kept rezzing Jean, so doesn't always work out. Still, that's a lot of Jean deaths. That is, I think, at least 9 Jean deaths total. I think 8 stabbies the one time, 1 stabby the other time. A lot of deaths. A lot of deaths without any actual death, actually, now that I think about it. Number 6. Cable and Bishop both get bested. I can't even believe that this happened. Cable is considered an Omega level mutant, and yet Wolverine was still able to take him down. And for reference, Wolverine is considered Beta level when it comes to his abilities and his control over them more specifically. At least I think he's still considered Beta level. He's definitely not Omega level, I'll tell you that much. Granted, Wolverine did have some help here from Bishop, and does at least choose to spare Cable during their fight as part of the Executioner song story. You see, he thinks that Cable is actually the one they're looking for, but really it's his evil twin Strife. Wolverine isn't quite ready to kill him dead though, not knowing about Strife, but he does have a small amount of doubt that stays in his head. So he's like, I'm just gonna hold off, because even though I think it's you, we don't know for sure. You're making me doubt it. Then when Bishop attempts to finish the job, because he's like, no way, we just hunted this guy down, we fought him, that's it, Wolverine in turn shows up Bishop by slicing his gun to pieces so that he can't actually kill Cable with it, telling him to cool off before getting another gun off the rack and getting back to sorting out this whole mess with Cable's currently very suspicious appearance and self. Even though, like we said, it's Strife, but we didn't know that yet. Or well, Wolverine didn't know that yet, at least.
Coming in at number 5, we have the villainous Wolverine of an alternate future, Saberclaw. Hailing from Earth 982, this son of Wolverine and an unknown woman absolutely hates his original father, so much so that it seems to have literally changed him into appearing more reminiscent of Sabretooth than his actual dad. Wearing adamantium sheaths on his bone claws to make them even deadlier, Saberclaw was briefly a member of this universe's Sinister Six before eventually being convinced to put his differences aside with his father and help defend the world from the threat of Galactus and the daughter of Loki. Just another day in complicated comic book family dynamics.
Number 4. Cyclops is shamed. When Emma and Scott started seeing one another, Wolverine was pretty quick to embarrass them and shame them in front of the rest of the team. Mainly, he focused his ire on Scott, who he saw as betraying Jean's memory. And he wasn't alone either. By the way, at this point, Jean had recently died and Scott and Emma were together, but yeah, people all felt pretty weird about it. A lot of the other X-Men felt similarly, and they began to actually treat Scott differently because of his and Emma's relationship. This was because the two had started seeing one another psychically while Scott was still with Jean, but he and Marvel Girl, as she was formerly known, were having marital problems at the time. He had a psychic affair with Emma, and then after Jean died, immediately started just being in this very public relationship with her. Wolverine even went so far as to fight Scott physically over this blossoming relationship with Emma. Don't worry though, Jean's ghost would arrive to give Scott the green light so we could all feel better about the whole thing. Jean's ghost always coming back to be like, look, everyone just be cool. I'm Jean's ghost, I am like a god. Number 3. Killed the Mongrels. These last few spots are definitely all competitors for the number 1 spot on this list in my opinion. This one is especially bad because the Mongrels were actually Wolverine's children, although he didn't know it at the time that he was forced to fight them. They were rounded up by his known son with Itsu, Daken. Daken was working with the Red Right Hand, a group who had a personal vendetta against Wolverine. Daken created the team known as the Mongrels, not even really to defeat Wolverine, despite Daken having trained them himself. It was kind of like a win-win situation for him. Either Wolverine would be killed by the children he didn't know or had forgotten he'd sired over the years, or Wolverine would end up killing them all. The latter was kind of how it went down, and when Wolverine learned that the members of the Mongrels had actually all been his children, and he didn't know that, he was pretty heartbroken. So I guess point 1 for Red Right Hand and Dawkins. Only sad points for Wolverine. No points for the Mongrels because they died. Number 2, Spider-Man gets hit where it hurts. In the heart. You can tell that this was a moment that really was upsetting to Peter Parker's Spider-Man because of how he reacts to it. At one point when both Wolverine and Spider-Man are staying in Avengers Tower, Pete and MJ, who is also there with Peter, have a kind of a relationship scandal. A news story is basically being spread around that MJ, who is still married to Peter at the time, is having an affair with Tony Stark. While Peter is distraught about this, Wolverine takes the opportunity to make a joke at MJ's expense and at the expense of her and Peter's relationship. He says, and I quote, "Sweet Cheeks messed up big time. It's not your fault she screwed up. I mean, if she had brains to go with all that beauty, she wouldn't be with you in the first place, right?" Ouch! Peter of course reacts by pushing Wolverine so hard that he goes flying through and out of a ceiling to floor window in the high-rise that was supposed to be made of unbreakable glass. So you can tell that one probably cut real deep for Peter. Whew. Number 1, the X-Force are defeated. The defeat of Shatterstar was just the beginning for the X-Force, unfortunately, in Executioner's song. Shortly thereafter, they would also be tracked down by Wolverine and taken out primarily by him and Psylocke, forced to surrender to the Blue X-Men and X-Factor teams. And they were backed into a corner fairly easily, I gotta say, with Wolverine choosing to hunt them down and citing it as one of the things he is best known for, which obviously here he proves he is best known for it. He's pretty good at hunting people down. Although I imagine X-Force, like the other teams, also felt pretty conflicted about this whole fight against their friends, so this combined with Wolverine's ruthlessness probably helped to convince them in surrendering. Still, pretty embarrassing that basically Wolverine and Psylocke show up and they're like, hey, we're just gonna do this, and then everyone comes in at the end to be like, yeah, we're here too.
Coming in at number 10, we've got a video game honorable mention with the Wolverine symbiote from the game Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. In this title's storyline, Wolverine has traveled to New York City to deal with a growing symbiote infestation, and even briefly fights Spider-Man when he believes the wall crawler is actually Venom. Unfortunately for Wolverine, he finds himself overwhelmed by actual symbiotes on top of a church and attacks Spider-Man again as the Wolverine symbiote. With all of his usual healing abilities on top of all the symbiote enhancements that the alien parasites offer, this version of Wolverine might just be one of the grossest versions we've ever gotten to see. Coming in at number 9, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by HYDRA in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of HYDRA-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 8, we've got a live-action detour with X-24 from the 2017 film Logan. An allegedly perfect clone of Wolverine, but with none of the compassion or humanity, X-24 was treated like an attack dog and followed the orders of Xander Rice to hunt down and capture the real Wolverine and the young mutant girl he was protecting. Based on Wolverine during his prime years, he was able to physically overcome the true Wolverine and was only able to be defeated at the last minute by a bullet made of pure adamantium right to the skull.
Number 7, is Hulk really the strongest there is? Yes, he still is, I think. He is the strongest there is. But he's not always the smartest, as is proven here in this fight against Wolverine from Incredible Hulk issue 340. Now it should be noted that in this fight, Wolverine is actually taking on the Grey Hulk, which isn't known for being one of the strongest personas or versions of the Hulk. But still, the impressive part here isn't so much even Wolverine's skill and strength as a fighter, although you're likely to be impressed by that somewhat still if you're so inclined, but the smarts and character development we see Wolverine display here. here. Wolverine accidentally picks a fight with Hulk by insulting him, unintentionally. Hulk responds by attempting to attack Wolverine, who manages to get the first slash and kind of dodge in successfully, but then decides to take the higher road and actually chooses to apologize to the Hulk, not wanting to fight him and attempting to fight against his own internal animalistic desire and instincts to do so. When Hulk refuses to let him go and says, "I've gotten smarter and you've gotten gutless," Wolverine replied with, "Knowing when to fight and when to walk away is more smarts than you'll ever have." Yeah, I like that. Such a good Wolverine line to Hulk. Like, I'm just like, whoo! Ouch, you're gonna need some ice for that burn, Hulk.
Coming in at number 6, we have the infamous zombie Wolverine. Many superheroes and villains of the Marvel Universe found themselves infected with an undead plague on the alternate world of Earth 2149, but Wolverine might be the character who experienced the oddest side effects from becoming a member of the Zombie Legion. Initially fighting alongside Magneto to help defeat the undead threat with the X-Men, Wolverine was eventually bitten and overwhelmed while attempting to defend Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s main base of operations. Turning against Magneto, this version of Wolverine slowly discovered his healing factor was affected by his zombification, meaning his arms could no longer support the adamantium claws throughout his body. Attacking any living thing he could with the shreds that remained of his limbs, this version of Wolverine would go on to even consume Galactus, becoming a cosmic undead threat to the rest of this very doomed Marvel Universe.
Number 5. Actually killed innocents. Other than Jamie, who Wolverine seemingly almost had killed but then ultimately did not have killed, and the countless other baddies that Wolverine has faced and defeated over the years, there are also other youngsters that Wolverine has been forced to take down. One of the worst moments where Wolverine has been forced to eliminate a youth happens actually outside of the main continuity in the Ultimate Universe, the reality of Earth 1610. Here, Wolverine is sent on a mission to do the X-Men's dirty work by taking out a young mutant who threatens the very rights mutants are basically fighting for. The sad part, really isn't this kid's fault. His mutant power simply manifested without him knowing and caused him to accidentally vaporize the entire residents of his town, including seemingly his high school crush or his girlfriend or sweetheart and his parents. So really feels pretty bad. And you're like, wow, Wolverine, really, wow, that's what you're doing? But he's like, hey, I gotta protect the mutants or something by killing a mutant or something. Seems a little shady, the reasoning there.
Coming in at number 4, we have Daken, the dark son of Wolverine. Named after the Japanese term for mongrel dog, Daken is the tragic child that Wolverine never knew about, his mother being murdered before Wolverine even knew he had a kid. Cut from his mother's body, Daken was raised to hate his father, and in their very first encounter, slashed open his stomach and left him to die. With the same incredible healing abilities and bone claws as his dad, Daken has had a long road of trying to find his proper place in the world and has fought on the sides of both good and evil over the course of his tragic life, but hopefully he'll stay more on the side of good going forward.
Number 3. Shatterstar gets shattered. That's right, Wolverine pretty much completely embarrassed and obliterated Shatterstar in the Executioner's Song story. While Shatterstar did seem to miraculously survive here, Wolverine gave him a fistful of claws, not only embarrassing Shatterstar, but also leaving Richter pretty distraught amidst the loss of his most dearest friend. Even back in the 90s, the feelings were pretty strong between Richter and Shatterstar, as is evident here, and in many of the comics. This all went down in an epic fight between various X-teams, including a split-up X-Men roster into 2 separate teams, Blue and Gold, and X-Factor besides. Wolverine is quick to jump into action, and Shatterstar doesn't even get to show off his own impressive fighting skills much before Wolverine turns him into a shish kebab. For someone who is known for being a proud warrior, this whole display, I imagine, would be pretty disappointing for Shatterstar. While he didn't physically die from his injury here, he may have died of embarrassment.
Coming in at number 2, we have the Wolverine from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In an alternate world where Charles Xavier is dead and Magneto is leader of the X-Men, Wolverine is a brutal warrior named Weapon X who has to be constantly subdued by the psychic abilities of Jean Grey in order to be a functioning member of the X-Men team. Eventually losing a hand while going on a suicide suicide mission to rescue this version of Jean from a version of Cyclops, this version of Wolverine for a time had heroic ambitions, but gave them up after being granted the power of the Celestials and turned into Weapon Omega, now determined to bring about the evolutionary future that he'd initially stopped the mutant apocalypse from achieving and declaring war against all of humanity. This new Weapon Omega is the farthest thing possible from Wolverine's usual heroics. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Brother Mutant, an evil variant of Wolverine combined with some of his greatest allies and greatest foes. On Earth 127, a male variant of the Scarlet Witch, known as the Scarlet Warlock, attempted to cast a spell that would transfer Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to Magneto, thus giving Magneto an incredible power boost given his magnetic abilities. However, something with the spell went wrong, and the Scarlet Warlock, Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, and the villain Mesmero were all merged into a singular being known as Brother Mutant. All 5 of these mutants' powers combined into one villainous figure, Brother Mutant was such a powerful threat that a multiversal team of other, more heroic Wolverines had to be assembled specifically to stop him, just to ensure that all of that power wasn't unleashed on the rest of the Marvel multiverse.